So it's been over 2 months since I've posted on this channel, but I'm trying to not only ramp up posting over the next couple of months, but also return to doing the Enemy of the State podcasts, hopefully weekly, but that's all in due time. I have some things that I have to figure out first. So if anything, this channel has taken more of a back seat over the last couple of months than it hopefully ever will again. And I'm just letting people know so that you don't think that I've forgotten about this channel, because I certainly haven't. And if somehow you're seeing this video but you don't know my main channel, check that out. It's called The Right Media. Now, today I want to discuss what I see as being the next creeping PC movement. We've seen the early roots of it with the coronavirus, but I predict that in the coming years or decades, we're going to see a rise in political movements designed to force Orientalization down our throats, much like we've seen already in the Western world with movements like Black Lives Matter. We've seen it with race-based affirmative action. We've seen it with skewed or false stats to paint the picture of police racism. And of course, that's more based on people of African descent. But what we're going to see is people of Oriental descent. And what I'm really talking about is more the influence of the Chinese government using Chinese culture as a way to spread their control. So it's not the entire Oriental world, but it's certainly an Eastern influence on the Western world. Of course, though, it'll only end up serving to divide people, but this is also why it's important to notice a cultural invasion while it's happening. Just because it divides doesn't mean that it's fake or that it's bad. Division is okay when it's separating you from something that's detrimental, but the propaganda will be used to both embolden those that the propaganda is designed to support, and it'll spark infighting within Western culture, much like we see now. The difference is that the new coming wave will be orchestrated by the governmental and social leaders of the ethnic group and of that government, whereas the previous or the current wave is orchestrated by more or less the rulers of the Western world for power and control by leveraging our indulgence in pity and the lie of equality, among many other self-sacrificing traits, against our culture. Those same facets will still be leveraged in what's to come. In the past, the powers that be have used guilt concerning America's past to fallaciously blame, condemn, and extort resources from primarily white people. It couldn't have just been sold as multiculturalism because there would be no seed for that. Now, the seed of acting on compassion has been sown by the fact that compassion is a byproduct of acting on guilt. When you feel guilty and you work to ameliorate that guilt, justification for feeling compassion rises to the surface. Suddenly you have justification for being compassionate. So we have to take it in baby steps. People see that they feel compassion for the groups that they're guilted into caring about, and now people think that compassion is a righteous motive on its own. And there is value to compassion, but it's not just a completely righteous motive on its own. Compassion breeds the lie of equality, and equality leads to multiculturalism because all cultures are equal by these terms. And the West's religious history also props up the notion that compassion always justifies action. I mean, of course, it's not true that all cultures are equal, but this is how you could call them docile sheep, have begun to accept multiculturalism as good, and they're going to feel unbridled compassion for dissent that arises from Chinese influence on the US. What I mean is that as Chinese influence on Western culture is resisted, there will be compassion that arises for Oriental people, and they'll be shown compassion despite the damage that the Chinese government is doing to our culture, or really what's left of it. So you could say, well, why even think about this? Well, never attempting anything new and sticking to tried and dependable systems becomes wasteful because it's not perfect or true in the Nietzschean sense. However, having no direction, having no order is also wasteful because there's no guidance. The one major benefit of never deviating from a system is that each instinct that arises out of that structure is given more fuel to recreate the world in its image, as opposed to attention, time, focus, energy being squandered on detrimental or directionless or simply amusing instincts. So in an authoritarian state, the pursuance of each goal will be allocated a percentage from the total resources of the nation. Now, North Korea has taken a treacherous authoritarian route, leaving almost no resources to sustain their system. China has supplied the world with cheap products, including labor, opening their wasteful system to the outside world so that a variance of instincts are allowed to sustain China, as opposed to only the instincts that arise from the Chinese government and Chinese culture. While the people of that country suffer, the government has continued to make waves on the global stage. So why do I say all of this? Well, China is attempting conquest around the globe, and they're using the force of their nation to do it. It's not one agency or one company or even one industry. It's a government with unchanging long-term goals, and they have the entirety of the surplus of their nation to increase their power around the world. That's why this is something to keep in the back of your mind as you see politics unfold over the next decade or so. China specifically is conducting a silent war. It's a non-violent type of invasion. We see it in Australia, Europe, South America, and the US rather heavily. Now, one tactic that comes to mind is how the CCP pays people to buy real estate in Australia and only rent to other people of Chinese descent. This was one of the first videos that I did back on the main channel. And also think of the video that I did on the Chinese government moving into Venezuela and other strategic points around the globe for the stated purpose of overtaking the US military in strength. And while I certainly think that they're behind in terms of technology and resource availability, we need to keep in mind how the Chinese government is stealing from other countries. They make 75% of mobile phones and 90% of PCs. Now think back to the Supermicro hack that affected US banks, major US companies like Apple and Amazon, and even government agencies like the CIA and the Department of Defense. I mean, I've done videos on a lot of that too, and much more. So the point of this is that this war won't be heard over the hillside. It'll be complete before most people even know what's going on. It's considered tame, like the UN's Agenda 21 replacement migration. There's a reason that Mike Pompeo warned state governors about Chinese influence recently. Mark my words, this is coming.